There's a specific kind of exhaustion that comes from being the reliable one, the steady one, the composed one who doesn't wobble. Most leaders don't recognize it as exhaustion. They just think, it's who I am. This is what leadership looks like. But being steady isn't just a personality trait, it's work. And when you're doing that work without recovering from it, something quietly depletes. Not all at once, just a slow drain until vibrancy feels like a distant memory and what seems like identity becomes a trap. If we haven't met, I'm Chris Quintana. I work one on one with business owners and executives on high performance leadership around clarity, energy, courage, and influence. Today, I'm thinking out loud about what happens when protection gets mistaken for identity. So the other day, I did a single card tarot pull. I was thinking about what energy needs to be released for 2026. And the card I got was the Ten of Swords. And I have a deck called the Tarot of the Cat People. I've had it since sometime in the 1980s. I've never seen it actually other than my deck. But anyway, the image on the card was in the foreground was a woman like curled up on a pile of rocks, and she looked worn out, sad, distressed, just not hard to tell from a picture, right? But definitely a downtrodden kind of look to it. Around her were 10 swords, hence the name of the card, right? 10 swords vertically, like forming like a fence or a perimeter or something, almost all the way around her. And off in the distance, there is what looks like an explosion with a cat's head in it, which is the fire cat. And I read the actual deck's interpretation of the card, and the deck talked about feeling imprisoned, feeling trapped, despair, and it commented on the fact that she's so into how she's feeling right now, she doesn't even notice the hopeful fire cat in the distance. What I saw when I looked at it was I recognized that swords are often protection. And so I could imagine somebody feeling like they needed protection, setting up a perimeter of swords, right? To symbolize that need for protection. But now this woman in this card was so trapped by what had originally been designed to protect her that she couldn't even see that there were brighter days on the horizon. And so this just hit me that how parallel that is and how similar that is to what I've been talking about in these videos about learning to leave behind what no longer works. She probably needed those swords for some reason, for protection at some point, but now they're just kind of closing in and hemming her in. And so, like I said, I've been talking a lot about this pattern of carrying forward into the next level things we should have left behind that didn't work, that no longer work for us. And sometimes what we forget to leave behind is a framework that was built to be protection, but somehow that protection became an identity. It might be the identity of, hey, I'm the reliable one. I'm the one everybody can count on. Or I'm the one with all the answers. I'm the calm one when everyone else is chaotic. I'm the master planner. I see all the details. One of those identities, they all seem and feel on the surface like great identities. It's good to be reliable. It's great to have the answers, to be able to stay calm, to be able to make a plan. These are not inherently bad traits. They're definitely pieces of an identity I would want. The issue is that sometimes those things become not just what you do, but how others see you and how you see yourself. And while they're great personality traits, sometimes just like that wall of swords that was originally for protection and then became a prison, we can lose track of why we developed these skills that have become identities, and we might hold on to them too long. If I have a skill, let me think. Okay, so I've talked before about brain injury days, early days of post brain injury, about how I had to learn how to be more aware of my energy levels and how things were going to impact me. And I got to really good planning with that. If I see that level of planning as a skill and I no longer need it and I can just kind of go with the flow a little bit more, it's easier to let go of a skill or a habit than it is to let go a piece of my identity, right? So if all it is oh, this is something I can do, that's one thing. But if I get to the point where I feel like, oh, this is part of who I am, then I might be a little bit more attached to it. I That can lead to a point where you don't really want to let go of it. So when we lose track of why we develop these identities, we can hold on to them too long, and that holding on can lead to exhaustion or anxiety or frustration. So let's take this planning example a little further. I worked with a project manager who was a super detail oriented problem solver. I mean, things that are so great to have in a project manager. This person was so good at anticipating problems and heading them off before they start. We didn't even always know what was going on because they were avoiding the problems from the very beginning. Not we, but the people working, right? You don't always know. Okay, let's try that again. Because right? So there's this project manager. Forgive me, this is the joy of being live. Sometimes I have to restart my brain. Um, this project manager was super detail oriented and a great problem solver. So great at anticipating problems and heading them off before the problems even started that the people on their team didn't even realize. That's the way I wanted to say that. The people on their team didn't even realize that the problems were being avoided. I mean, they were just that good at what they did. So the question when I was working with this client was, why did they feel so anxious about work all the time if it was going so well? So it turns out that this skill of being able to anticipate every little thing actually grew out of a bad relationship where that kind of anticipation was kind of life saving. So if you can anticipate the mood of the other person, learn to manage their emotions, anticipate and solve problems before there was actually an untenable situation, that was really, really important for this person. And then that same pattern became a strength in the workplace. But what looked like project management to everyone else kind of felt like, well, it's just who I am and what I do. They didn't even realize it was a survival pattern and that the message of solving all those problems that they were giving to their body was ultimately red alert within their nervous system. And so the emotional effort of doing that work was kind of overwhelming. And they couldn't see why because, well, I just see all the angles and everything. It's just what I do. So it never felt like extra work, this anticipating. But all of that planning and all of that extrapolating is a huge mental load, especially when there's all this underlying other stuff within it. So you have the mental load, you have the load on your nervous system. And if you don't give back to yourself and manage that energy, you're going to feel it. So unfortunately, if you see this kind of planning for everything as a personality trait, you're really likely to ignore the early signs of energy drain and override yourself in order to protect that identity. And that's what this client was going through. Here's another example. The always calm business owner who made sure that everything ran smoothly for everyone else and never took time to rest and recover. Her kids, her business, her husband all came first because that's just what you do when you're a mom, wife, business owner. It's just what you do. I asked her once where that decision came from, and she didn't actually know. And I think that's common. We often don't realize where these decisions come from. Maybe it's how we saw a boss or a parent handle things. So we just decided we have to have the same priorities. And then it becomes part of the definition of your role. And that definition often carries with it unspoken rules. And if you spend too much time fitting into a mold, you might not notice when your role shifts and when the rules also need to shift. as the kids get older, as the business changes, as your relationship needs to be more than just parent and business partner. So it's really important that we can connect to where things are coming from and be able to say, is this still working for me? Okay, so here's one more example. There's a solopreneur who finally got a couple employees. He spent all his time answering their questions and reviewing their work. And I remember him actually saying to me, I have done everything you have told me to do. This was supposed to make less work for me. I'm thinking of firing them all and just going back to being by myself. There were several layers of what was going on at that time, but what relates to this conversation today is that his identity of I run the whole thing, when he did run his whole thing, required him to know every detail of everything that was going on. He had to have all the answers. So he brought in new people, but he never learned to trust his team. And what they learned was everything has to go through him. Came kind of this interesting loop because his identity didn't evolve when his business did. And what had formerly been his strengths became an obstacle and a roadblock. When we get used to filling a specific role, it can become part of our identity. And that makes it even harder to notice when we have brought past assumptions into a new phase of life. Those assumptions not only don't work at this new level, but they can also hold us back. And the result is often that sense that something good is just out of reach, or that feeling that everything is just a little bit off, that there isn't just as much energy, there just isn't as much energy available as there used to be. So here's a couple of questions I think are worth sitting with today. What is the internal agreement you've made about being reliable or about being the calm one? Let's back this up a minute. What's the identity that you have attached to? What is the identity that you have attached to that is the thing that most people see? You're the reliable one, you're the calm one, you're the one who knows all the answers. Is it something else? What's that identity? Now, here's the questions. What's the internal agreement you've made about being that thing? What have you decided is required in order for you to be valuable? And is that agreement still serving you, or is it quietly draining you? Most leaders who are exhausted from being reliable aren't exhausted from the work itself. They're exhausted from the belief that they're not allowed to do anything else, and they're not allowed to be anything else. They've made that reliability their identity. And when it's your identity, anything less feels like failure. So you don't wobble, you just keep holding it until there's nothing left to hold. And when success only works because you are crossing your values, it's not aligned and it's unsustainable by design. And being reliable becomes crossing your values when you're absorbing everyone else's emotions without processing your own. You're holding space for everyone else without anyone holding space for you. You're isolated in your steadiness instead of supported in it. And that's not leadership. That's compensation. And your nervous system doesn't miss what you're doing to yourself. I want to offer a different way to think about this. Being steady is a gift. It's a gift. It's a talent. So is being organized. So is being able to see all the little details. They're gifts. Your ability to hold space, stay grounded, not panic when everything else is chaotic, that's valuable. But it's only sustainable when it's supported. When you have spaces where you don't have to have it all together. When you have people who can hold your uncertainty the way you hold theirs. And when you give yourself permission to wobble without believing, it makes you less reliable. That's when steadiness becomes sustainable instead of depleting. You don't have to carry everyone else's uncertainty alone in order to be a good leader. You just need to renegotiate that internal agreement that says you do. If you're the person everyone depends on, and you can't remember the last time you felt light instead of heavy, that's what we look at inside my alignment call. Not to make you less reliable, but to see where your reliability has led you to exhaustion and what needs to shift so you can keep being the grounded presence you are without it costing you your vibrancy.